We are live on the Ourlads Football YouTube channel as we talk some more ACC football, scouting the ACC, defense. That's right. We're going to talk about some of the top defensive players who might be available in the 2025 NFL Draft. Hopefully you've been joining us over the past month or so as we have been diving into college football early for the 2025 draft. And again, on these videos, it's not just all about the draft. A lot of it is just to get you ready for the 2024 college football season. And while we're at it, letting you know the players that we're going to be zeroing in on for potential 2025 draft targets. So we've got a lot of videos, though, to come, especially as we get closer to August and kickoff. So make sure to subscribe here to the channel. You don't want to miss any of our shows. We've got scouts galore here at Ourlads.com, including these two gentlemen. Joining me, of course, as always, Dave Syvertsen and Hayden Russell. How's it going, guys?
Great, Greg. How are you?
Doing good. So now we're this is the third conference. We're about to end our third conference on today's show. And then we have the Big 12, and then we're pretty much it. Then we've got a little house cleaning, I guess. We have to try to figure out how to incorporate those remaining independent and Pac-12, those two Pac-12 teams. So we'll figure it all out. So Big 12 next week, and that's even going to be interesting. I don't know if you're going to be with us, Dave. I know you've got a vacation coming up, but still, the Big 12, they're going through a lot of changes too. So matter of fact, I was already getting confused about, who's in and who's out. So I think this is going to be a confusing, fun season in college football anyway, but the Big 12 could be very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the Big 12 is widely considered one of the premier offensive point scoring conferences in college football. And you don't really go there to look for defensive prospects, but with certain programs in and certain programs out, that might change. So we'll see.
Yeah. And of course, offense, though, that's another thing. And so we'll find out a little bit. And they've got one of the fine young quarterbacks leaving. Actually, yeah, one of the two leaving from the Big 12 to the SEC. But on today's show, we're going to continue to talk ACC football and defense. And we want to remind everybody, too, because the draft review guide is this out now and available? Is this are we at that point right now where you can order it? I know you can order it, of course, and then expect it in the mail. I would guess in the next couple of days, right?
Yeah, I mean, I check the mail every day to see if it's here. Right? Every day I check to see if it's here. So I would say it's within. It could be tomorrow, could be Saturday, could be early next week.
And this was last year's. So does anybody know who's on the cover this year?
Nope,
2024 guys.
Everyone.
Okay. Any guesses? You have a guess?
Oh man, if they're, I mean, Caleb is going to be the.
But that's too obvious because look, it was Richardson last year, and he wasn't the top pick.
I'm going to go on a whim. It's going to be a shocker. They're going to put Michael Penix on the cover.
Ooh, that actually would be interesting. Yeah, I was trying to think what top 10 pick was the most interesting one, and that it had to have been him. I do know that they really, if you want to get away from the quarterback, maybe we put Marvin Harrison Jr. up there.
That could be a good one too. And of course, also the draft guide has been available for the past couple of months. This is still a great way for any fan to check out because even though the draft is over, now you know which players to look for on your respective teams. Scouting guides are in here, especially for not only starters or not starters, but draftable players, but college free agents following the draft. So it's just loaded with profiles. And now you know which players to match with the teams in the NFL. Okay, so let's get right into it. ACC defense. We did the offense last week. So if you missed it, check it out. It's available, of course, on the channel. So subscribe, like, and share. But we're going to talk defense, starting with the edge. And the first player we're going to talk about, Dave, is going to be Jasheen Davis out of Wake Forest. And this is like one of those typical players that just doesn't really have the star power because he's not in one of the big-time schools, a school that is a playoff contender or anything like that at Wake Forest. Yet, if you look at it and you look at his numbers, you look at his production, you say to yourself, yeah, well, it hasn't happened yet, but maybe this is the year that people are going to really know who this kid is.
Yeah, I mean, Jasheem Davis, it's a fifth-year senior. So at this point in the year, when you're in information gathering mode, this is one of the things you do. What recruiting class were they coming in out of high school? Is he an underclassman? Is he a fourth-year senior? Is he a fifth-year senior? We still have some sixth-year seniors because of the COVID season back in 2020, just giving these guys some extra eligibility. And you can see that a guy with this level of production over multiple years, you're saying, oh, why has he not come out yet? Because at this point, what are we looking for before we get into the most important part of the process, which is tape from the 2024 season? You're looking at past production and you're looking at tools. If you look at this kid's production, he is approaching all-time great numbers. He is within striking distance of being the all-time leader in ACC history in tackles for loss.
Wow.
He's had 86 pressures over the last 2 seasons. That is the most among returning ACC defenders. So we're talking about a guy that's making plays against the run and pass. So why are we not talking about him more? Why is he not in that, hey, this is going to be Chase Young, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, top 10 pick, right? And it's the lack of tools. And while he's no slouch in that department, you can see pretty quickly early on and just the preliminary watching of his tape from the last season is that he doesn't have that juice, and he does get stalled out by quality offensive tackles at a certain point. So he doesn't have a lot of secondary rush moves, and he doesn't have that top tier explosive grade. And now it starts to make sense that this guy's been in college a long time. If he was a special talent physically, in addition to this level of production, he probably would have come out by now. So, but by no means is this kid something that you should overlook. I love his game. I think he is an every down weapon. I think he's a starting caliber edge defender in a lot of schemes at the next level. He's 6'3", 259. He'll probably play at 260 plus. He's incredibly consistent, multiple pressures in 17 straight games. That's a streak that's going on right now. So he'll start the 2024 season trying to go for that 18th straight game with consecutive pressures. He has motor. He has bend. The standout trait I love in his game is the hand strength. He is someone that tosses tackles to the side. He controls the engagement with the blocker. And you can see when he is matched up against a guy that is not going to be a pro tackle, which you have to be careful with watching that tape and evaluating. He is a man among boys when he is not matched up against those guys. And that's like, it's almost like watching a lower level of college football. It's like, hey, you better be dominant against those kind of guys, and that's what he has.
So have you been able to see a film with him matched up against pro talent?
Yeah, I mean, I liked what he did against Florida State last year. I thought that he did, it's those guys aren't, don't have any first-round picks on that offensive line, but I do think he handled himself very well. And, the tape that I haven't gotten to yet is against his best competition. I'm hoping to get to that prior to, but he has faced off against a lot of quality talent. Again, that active streak that I talked about, that was through all of ACC play last year. And the year prior. So again, He is matching up against the best of what his schedule is offering him and doing a good job. He just hasn't really had that premier standout tape against a future pro tackle.
Okay. Can he develop those tools that you're talking about that are missing, or is he pretty much what he is and he's just going to have to pick up maybe other aspects of his game as best he can to compensate?
Yeah, it's always a good question. He's going to turn 23 in December. And from what I know about anatomy and training, because of what I do full time, I would say he's not going to all of a sudden become more athletic. But in the same breath, he is athletic enough to be a pro defensive end. You just don't have as much margin to work with when you're this caliber athlete, meaning he needs to be perfect with his techniques. He needs to be perfect with his hands, and he needs to play the run at a really high level to warrant a grade that could get him, maybe into the first round, but probably a day 2 guy. But a name that kind of came to my mind while watching him was Kwity Paye from Michigan a few years ago, and he ended up being a first-round pick. And by no means is he going to be a Pro Bowl or all-pro edge rusher, but he's a very solid, reliable defender for that front.
Yeah, big year also for Paye. Final year of his rookie deal, so he has and he's not going to be the guy either for the Colts more than likely, but just solid player. So nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, you can have a long career in the NFL being a solid football player. Okay, Hayden, Speaking of Florida State, you want to talk about Patrick Payton, who led the team last year in tackles for loss, which is pretty impressive considering they had a first-round draft pick up front. But what really stood out to me for Payton was his 10 pass breakups, which I'm assuming are going to be, he just bats a lot of balls at the line of scrimmage. Is that what he's doing?
Oh, there's no kidding on that. Just looking at his length, I mean, it pops off the screen. I mean, like immediately as soon as you turn on the tape. I mean, he enters the 2024 season. I don't want to say he's going to be in the conversation for first edge rusher off the board. He could be, but he's definitely in the conversation as a first rounder, as a top edge rusher in the ACC. As you talked about, 20.5 tackles for loss this past season, over the past 2 seasons, 12 sacks over the past 2 seasons. He's looking to build on his resume in his junior season. Still some things he needs to improve on before I can say he's bona fide edge number 1, but I'll get into that just a little bit later. He's listed on the website, 6'5", 254 pounds. His height weight ratio, it's super enticing, for a team in need of a really long edge rusher coming off of the edge. I watched a couple games on him. I thought the game that was most impressive, and this might not be the game that you think of, was actually the Georgia game where Florida State got absolutely manhandled in the game. I think it was like 63-3 or something like that. I mean, it was a total onslaught. He was the one player on defense that just continued to stand out throughout the game. As we talked about, his arm length just stands out absolutely immediately. Able to shuck blocks, got violent hands that help him latch on quickly. Notable violence, always looking to strip the ball out every single play. He even stripped the ball out and got it from Carson Beck in the Georgia game. He's really quick off the ball. He's got long strides upfield. He's going to stress offensive tackles out immediately. If you just need someone that's going to give you that size, speed specimen off the edge, he's going to be your guy this year. However, from a pass rush standpoint, felt like he won a lot with his length and his speed, which no problem with that. Just not a lot of pass rush moves in his arsenal. Didn't really see him string together moves. Didn't see a lot of counter moves. Just needs to be able to shed blocks more consistently. Like I said, he's got the ability to do so. He showed it on tape, undoubtedly, but just need to see it a little bit more consistently. And, entering his redshirt junior season, I'm curious to see how he's going to develop moving forward from here.
All right. Now, let's just talk a little bit about some of the best of the rest that I'm just going to throw out there for you. And let's start with the kid that's not going to the draft, but he had such a dominant year last year that we're going to definitely be keeping an eye on this one, and that's Ruben Bain Jr. for the Miami Hurricanes, who led the team as a true freshman in sacks. Seems to play really good against the run as well. But, I mean, he's putting up some really impressive numbers for a true freshman. I don't know if you guys have had an opportunity to see this kid yet. I know it's a long way off, kind of, before we start thinking about, when he's coming out. But that's a kid that is going to be a standout player more than likely that we need to be keeping an eye on in the ACC this year. You also have Ashton Galat from Louisville, a couple seniors, Galat from Louisville, and Rucker, Kamen Rucker from North Carolina. So these are guys that we're expecting to come out in the NFL draft. Galat, he actually led the team in tackles for loss and sacks last season for Louisville. We know they had a really good football team, also very good against the run. And Rucker led his team in tackles for loss and sacks last season for the Tar Heels. Tar Heels not as good, of course, on defense, but still, he had an impressive season. And he's had really an impressive overall. I think he's had 4 seasons of production. So he's been a really valuable player for the North Carolina defense. And they need as many good defensive players as they can get their hands on. So I don't know if you guys have anything on those 3 players or anyone else that we did not talk about yet.
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 guys you talked about, Galata and Rucker, these are just the production is similar to who I talked about when at the start of the show with Davis, is that, you can see that the tools are not there to be considered top tier players, but you cannot overlook this level of production. I think Rucker has a little bit more to work with in terms of his body, his frame, and what he could do at the next level, where Galata, I think, if you look at some of the production he got, he kind of fell into some of it, which is not a bad thing. You like hustle, you like grit. But again, tools, skill set, techniques, secondary rush moves. You have a little bit more to work with, Rucker. In regard to Bain, I don't have much on him other than the fact that the kid's got a pro body right now. It's amazing how some of these kids, you watch them, like these kids are in high school last year or even 2 years
amazing.
prior to. Definitely, 6'3". I think he was waiting at 265, 275, somewhere in that range. And to play with that kind of juice at that kind of size at that age, he'll be a name that we're talking about at this time next year.
Yeah, he's actually already, I think, a bigger player than the two seniors.
Yeah.
So, because Rucker's only, I think, 6'2". So, but both of them are right around that 265, 275 as well. Okay. So let's talk about the interior of the defensive line in the ACC. And the one player that you wanted to highlight, which is not a surprise if you've been watching these videos, Hayden likes to go with the sleepers, especially if they come from the FCS. Thor Griffith, who is now going to be playing for Louisville. Talk a little bit about Thor Griffith, Hayden.
And not just the under-the-radar guys, but the nose tackles too. They don't get enough love, but they have a really important job on the defense for sure. Yeah, Thor Griffith, he's going to be one of the big unknowns in college football. I mean, unless you were a big fan of the Ivy League, you've probably never heard of him, over the past couple of years. You might not even hear a whole lot about him this year just because of the role that he plays. Like I said, he's going to be your run-stuffing nose tackle. Not going to be a guy that's going to get a bunch of sacks, but he is going to be a guy that's going to take double teams. He's going to be a guy that that gets pushed into the backfield, gets some TFLs, but he's not going to be like this big, like massive pass rusher for Louisville, but he's going to have a really important role. Like I said, transferred from Harvard. He was a second-team All-American this past season in the FCS. He was a freshman All-American back in 2021. If you're looking for the resume, he's definitely got it. He's consistently been one of the most dominant players in the Ivy League over the past 3 seasons. He should step up and be Louisville's primary nose tackle this season. I don't see why he wouldn't be. His run-stuffing ability is really impressive. When he sank his pads down and took on double teams, I mean, he was completely immovable sometimes. And I know we're talking about jumping from the Ivy League to the ACC, but still super impressive. I mean, like, just totally stood his ground, really good at splitting double teams. So we're going to see if he can continue to do that at the next level. Great pop on contact. He's going to stop pulling guards in their tracks. Like I talked about, he's not going to be a guy that's going to get a ton of sacks. He's a high-effort player. He might get some sacks with his first step, with his high effort, but he's not going to be a guy with a polished pass rush arsenal, and everything like that. But if you need someone that's going to do the dirty work in the trenches, Thor Griffith is going to be that guy for you.
All right.
He's got a really, really interesting background, physical profile too. He was a top 10 wrestler nationally in high school. I believe number 2 in the state, number 4 in New England. He was an accomplished shot putter. I mean, these are traits. These are things this time of year. We keep saying this every time we do these shows, but right now it's not just about the film. It's like, get some background. He was on the Bruce Feldman freak list last year, which is reserved for the top freakiest athletes in the country. That list actually comes out at some point over summer. That's something that all of you guys should read. It's from The Athletic, Bruce Feldman. And it's a great way to learn about some of the best athletes in college football. And for a guy from Harvard to come from, and A, Hayden's talking about him, and B, Bruce Feldman's talking about him. I mean, it's something that, it's something to pay attention to no matter what position he plays.
All right. Dave, you are going to highlight Jamir Carter from Virginia.
Yeah, so this guy will not be on the freak list this summer. And I want to put this out there before I start talking about him. I don't view him as one of the top defensive tackles production wise. He's not a pass rusher, but this is an NFL defensive lineman. No question about it. I actually noticed him while scouting Drake May last year against Virginia. And it was the body type. You watch so much football, and then you start to really know, all right, what does a pro defensive lineman look like, especially a nose tackle type, which is where I think this guy's going to fit. And before I even saw him play, I'm saying that's an NFL defensive tackle body right there. Let's see what he's got. And without knowing much about him, I saw pass rush and unbelievable stout run defense, 2-gap, handling double teams, getting off blocks, stack and shed, everything. And, then I do a little bit more research on him. I did watch him a little bit more because I did think there was a shot he was going to come out last year. And that was by far the best pass rush game he's had of his entire career, because this guy's never had more than 8 pressures in a season. With that said, he's one of the most, he plays as many snaps as almost any defensive tackle in the country. He doesn't come off the field, but what I like about him is that he's going to be a day 3 pick that will come into the NFL and contribute to your defensive line rotation right away. He's going to be a stout run defender. I do think there is something in him that can add a pass rush repertoire. He's actually down 10 to 15 pounds this offseason because it sounds like they're going to try to put him in some 3 technique rules. And, it's an interesting thing to read about because he could have come out last year and he would have been drafted. But if he comes out and gets sheds some weight, they put him in a 3 tech role and he starts to rush the passer, he could skyrocket because he is elite in some of the more unimportant areas of playing defensive tackle because we're such a pass rush focused league right now with the defensive line and defenders in general. But there's still a lot of value in a guy like this. I think he could be a Keanu Benton type player. Someone that just comes in out of school right away and can handle the rigors of playing inside defensive line as a rookie.
Okay. I've got a few more that we want to throw in there to the group as best of the rest mentions. And we've got 2 from Notre Dame that I got to get your guys' opinions on, of course, Howard Cross and Riley Mills. Both of them are seniors. Looks like they're both probably going to come out. Cross, a little bit on the smaller side, so that might impact exactly what happens. But he seems to be really good, both against the run and the pass, and especially the run. It seems like he's put up production-wise. It looks like he's been a really good run stuffer for the Irish. But as well, the pressures are up too. So I think he's a really complete defensive tackle. Mills, he actually was quite productive last season. Cross seemed like, if you just look at statistically, again, Cross looks like maybe the more complete player, but Mills has 9.5 career sacks. You don't see that kind of production from Cross. So what's the difference when you take a look at Notre Dame's defensive front? Because these 2 guys, we talked about Michigan's defensive tackles. Well, these 2 guys aren't that far behind. So what are the things that you're looking at between these 2 guys? I don't know if whoever wants to start, because this is the beginning of talking about Notre Dame's defense, because we're going to be talking about Irish defenders with every position on this video.
Sure. Yeah, I can get started with it. Cross, honestly, I'll be honest, like he's not someone that was on my radar this past season. Now, Riley Mills was. I thought Riley Mills had potential to come out this past season and potentially be a day 3 draft pick. Decided to come back to Notre Dame, could potentially raise his draft stock. I mean, he's going to end up being one of the strongest defensive linemen in college football. If you look at some of his tape from this past season, what he did to some offensive linemen this past year with his violence, with his strength was so impressive. It's just incredibly impressive. His bull rush. I mean, and on top of that, you throw in his effort. He's such a high effort player. I mean, those 9.5 career sacks, like from his position with his type of skill set, is super impressive to me. With that said, don't feel like he's going to be more of a nose tackle type. If you're a team that runs a 40 front, needs a 1 technique, who can, take on double teams, I think he's going to be your guy. But in terms of a consistent pass rusher at the next level, probably not going to fit that role. He's going to have a few sacks, maybe not a ton that you'd like from like a 40 front 3 tech. But like I said, if you're looking at the freaks list, Bruce Feldman's freak list next year, I would not be surprised at all to see his name on there.
Yeah, Dave, I mean, if you look at it, the size of these guys is completely different. I mean,
yeah.
Mills is 6'5", but only 295.
Yep.
Cross is only 6'1", 284.
Yeah. Yeah. So right now I have 305 on Mills. I mean, whatever. I mean, here's a good comparison that should be fresh in our head right now from last year's draft class. Mekhi Wingo and Mason Smith. All right. Mason Smith is this oversized, really tall, really freaky athletic, elite level power, something that is going to make scouts and coaches at the next level drool, because you don't see these kind of tools come around often. And every coach with that ego is going to say, hey, I can get that guy to work. And he's going to be a big time player. College football player, Mekhi Wingo was a lot more productive. He had a lot more extensive history. He was very disruptive. He was small, very small, off the charts small for the defensive tackle position. And Howard Cross III, son of Howard Cross, the tight end that played for the Giants, by the way, you watch him play. He's a little bit more disruptive. You hear his name called more often when you're watching Notre Dame play. And I did think he was going to come out last year. He really started to break out halfway through the season last year. And he plays bigger than his size, but at the end of the day, you're still 280, 290 pounds. I mean, there are very few defensive tackles that can last at the next level beyond just a very specific package caliber player. And that's what bumped Mekhi Wingo down to the 6th round. I think I had a 4th round grade on him. He went to the 6th round. Some teams just aren't going to draft someone that size, where Mills maybe doesn't have as much star power behind his college tape, and he doesn't get his name called as often. This guy projects to the next level much better. And, we have to remember when we do this, when we scout, there is a fine line between a good college football player and an NFL prospect. And this is a really good example that there's no question in my mind that Cross might be a better player on from the fan perspective. Mills is going to go higher in the draft.
All right. There's another senior, by the way, who looks like he might be coming out. Enes Peebles from Virginia Tech, transferred over from Duke, so he'll be playing for the Hokies. And he really didn't have much of a career up until last year. Broke out last year as a 4th-year senior, and so now he's going to make his way over to Virginia Tech. We talked about Virginia Tech on the last show, some of the cool offensive players to keep an eye on. So Virginia Tech, an up-and-coming program, a little bit of growing pains, new coach and all that, but that's a team on the rise. And also, I wanted to mention Peter Woods, similar to Bain in Miami, only a sophomore this year, true sophomore, 5-star recruit. Didn't get a lot of playing time because of the 2 dudes that Clemson saw leave via the draft just a couple of months ago. But Peter Woods already just looks like he's going to be a star. He put up some really good numbers in limited touches. So Bain from Miami, Woods from Florida. These are 2 of the best true freshmen in the country last season. And I can imagine they're just going to get better. But Peebles is the one to keep an eye on, I guess, for the draft. All right, let's talk about the linebacker position now as we make our way to another position. And Dave, let's start, speaking of Clemson, with Barrett Carter, because Barrett Carter over the last 2 seasons has been extremely productive. He's been a big weapon. Matter of fact, they had a heck of a linebacker group last year. Now we see, of course, one of them gone to the NFL. But Carter, he's a guy that is going to be just such a huge part of what Clemson is going to hope to do this year. And again, I found it very interesting because he was very productive in 2022, very productive in 2023. I know some people, some scouts might feel that he was a little bit better one year to the next, but still, I think he was very consistent.
Yeah, I mean, this is a kid that at this point last summer, I put him as one of my top 32 players in the country in regards to the 2024 draft, assuming that, at some point you have to make a guess if these kids are going to come out this next year. So I assumed that he was going to be linebacker 1 or linebacker 2 in the country. He's going to come out. He'll be a 1st-round pick. That's where I had looked. That was my outlook on him at this time last year. And I plan to do that again at some point mid-July. I'll start putting out my top 32 nationally. It's fun to go back and look at where you were right, but also where you were very wrong. And I had multiple guys where I was very wrong on. But Barrett Carter is a really interesting athlete. And this is what the NFL is really starting to look for at that linebacker position. I shouldn't say start to. That's what the league is looking for. They're not really as into the inside gap run defenders that can't really run. They can't turn. They can't follow tight ends and backs in coverage. They can't keep up with quarterbacks in space. They look for this kind of athlete. Yes, a little undersized, 6'1", 225, might not have the ideal reach to deal with blockers. But this is a 5-star recruit that was a top-notch running back as well. He actually arrived to Clemson as a safety. If you watch their usage in 2022 and 2023, which is what you start to touch on, Greg, he was a lot better on paper in 2022 because they lined them up out over the slot. Over 300 times, the second most in the country among linebackers. I mean, he really was more safety than linebacker. In 2023, he was in line. They had a coaching change. He was in line next to Jeremiah Trotter a little bit more, and you still saw that like star potential, the playmaking, the speed, the burst, the quickness, the agility, the bend. One of the best blitzing linebackers. I mean, him and Trotter were just a lot of fun to watch play football last year. But if you watch all his snaps, not just the highlights, he gets lost in the shuffle. I don't think he really knows what's going on at all times. I think he has a hard time making reads. He does have a very hard time getting off blocks, and his missed tackles, they need to be cleaned up if you're going to be a first-round caliber linebacker. I could see a Patrick Queen type player in him if he cleans up some of those issues. But at worst, even if he doesn't clean up and he's not your every down defender, he's just this new age linebacker that can, he's going to help you out against the pass more than your traditional guy. And, you like to gamble on traits that he has. Dabo Swinney actually called him one of the best pure football players he's ever coached, just in terms of the overall impact. And think about who that guy has coached over the years on the defensive side of the ball. For him to say something about that, and that means something to me as well when these coaches really dive deep on these guys. And, you have to kind of know who puts out fluff and who doesn't. And I've never heard him say anything like that about any other player he's had there. And he's had multiple high first-round picks.
Well, like you said, though, Clemson, this is a big year for Swinney and the program. And it's guys like Carter that are going to be counted on to, lift the program up as best they can. I know the defense has been fine compared to the offense recently, but still, we'll find out. The one thing I haven't noticed from Clemson, as good as the players have been lately, the last couple of years, there really haven't been like that, those wow guys. That you just go, wow, man, he's making incredible plays on defense, game-changing type plays. And if Carter can do that and help Clemson this season, that would be huge for him, because a lot of people were surprised that his teammate, when did he get drafted? He was what, 5th round Eagles, 6th round? When did he get drafted?
It was 4th or 5th round.
Okay. Yeah. And that was surprising. A lot of people thought he was going to go maybe at least a round or two earlier. So, all right. Next up, Cam Arnold, and a BC player who could be headed to the draft as a 5th-year senior. Hayden, what you like about this kid is that he's just gobbled up the tackles. He's had over 200 tackles in the last 3 seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Cam Arnold, once again, not going to be a player that many people have heard of unless you're following Boston College. He's a very similar body type. You'll hear me mention a little bit in this, comparing him a little bit to Jay Higgins. Just if you're looking at him from a size standpoint, he has a lot of similarities to Jay Higgins, who, like I said, we talked about on the show just a couple weeks ago. He's not quite as physical as Jay Higgins. He plays with, or I should say, he has the athleticism to hold up at the next level. Just to give you a little bit of background on him, he started his career at safety, switched over to linebacker, so that's where the size concerns comes from. He's been a consistent starter for them since 2021. He's racked up 217 tackles over the past 3 seasons. He's had a handful of TFL, sacks, PBUs, interceptions. He was the MVP of the Fenway Bowl this past season, so he definitely has the resume to back up his play on the field. Boston College's defense has a load of experience this year. I haven't dug into their entire defense, but they're going to be one of the ones that I'm interested in just based off of the experience that they have on that side of the ball. He typically aligned at their will linebacker position. He excelled at this role. His coverage skills are what was most impressive to me, leveraging his zone. He's quick to read and react to what was going on in front of him, put himself in good positions to make plays, both in the run and the passing game. He had the man technique to be able to carry tight ends up the sideline, down the field, and carry running backs as well with decent technique, good leverage. So from a coverage standpoint, I feel like that's going to be his strength going to the next level. Now, similarly to Jay Higgins, his speed is a little bit concerning to me. I wouldn't say it's bad. I wouldn't say it's great. I'll just say it's okay. It's fine. But just don't see him as that sideline-to-sideline defender that you're looking for, and maybe a complete linebacker. Also, different from Jay Higgins, I should say, where Jay Higgins, oftentimes with 171 tackles, you'd see him charging down into the box as kind of like a thumper. That's just not really the role that Cam Arnold is going to play. He's definitely more athletic type. You're going to bring him in for passing type situations, and that's going to be his role. Probably a rotational guy at the next level, but still someone you could see as a draft pick in the draft this coming season.
Well, he's going to be coached by a former NFL defensive coordinator, Tim Lewis. So
that'll help, definitely.
And that's a program to keep an eye on with Bill O'Brien back. So I think the fans are really excited about what's going on there. Why not? When you get a coach like Bill O'Brien. All right. One more a big surprise, Notre Dame. Jack Kaiser, a fifth-year senior, and over 4 seasons, he's produced 185 tackles, but also 4 interceptions, 4 forced fumbles. He's also good in coverage. A couple of those interceptions he returned for touchdowns. And just one of these players, too, that just – I don't know why. I guess depending on, I don't know what kind of scheme Notre Dame specifically ran, why he wasn't on the field as much as you would have thought a player of his caliber would have been. But obviously, Bertrand is gone. I'm sure Kaiser is going to have a lot of snaps this year in possibly his last season. So I don't know if you guys were considering Kaiser as one of your top linebackers as well.
The only thing that stood out to me was just the versatile production, not just a run stuffer, not just a pass, but in terms of tape, just haven't really gotten deep on there. I mean, they had a couple guys that got drafted last year. They had 2 linebackers that got drafted last year. And sometimes that's a great thing for a team, not a great thing for a draft prospect, because you're just not getting as many live looks. And that could be a reason why he goes back. But all it takes is a good year of tape for him to be in that same tier, if not even higher than those guys. And, their success and at the Senior Bowl is going to probably open up the door for him to get a look there if he puts enough on tape, or even at the East-West Shrine, maybe even at the Hula Bowl. Those are the games where if you feel like you didn't get enough tape on these guys because of previous players playing in front of them, that's where those bowl games really come into play.
Well, before we move on, we're going to stick with Notre Dame again, stick with you, Dave, and talk about a player that, I don't know if you're watching college football in 2022, you watch this kid play, especially if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're like, man, is this guy going to be good? And we're talking about Benjamin Morrison as we switch over to corner. Yeah. And, we just talked about Will Johnson a couple weeks ago and how it's possible Will Johnson, because he's so good, could be, depending on the quarterback situation, could be the top pick in the draft, or at least the top non-quarterback in the draft. Well, if Will Johnson wasn't in the same draft, then Benjamin Morrison might actually hold that title as well, because this kid is so dynamic, Dave, that if he comes out this year, and it's very possible he will because he's that good, those 2 corners coming out, the discussion about, I know we saw Stingley and Gardner just a couple of years ago, and that's how they're going to compare him immediately to. But that's as, if anybody just wants to just get a head start on that, just we'll start with that. Just whatever you saw with Stingley and Sauce and what you're seeing right now, that's what you're going to see with these 2 guys, including Morrison.
Yeah, that's the situation that came to my mind. Again, I like recency bias, because I know a lot of those that are listening and are going to listen to this down the road. That's like, all right, what's in my recent memory that I can draw this to? And that Derek Stingley, Sauce Gardner debate that just got talked to death leading up to the draft weekend, it's still going to be talked about. Because Sauce got off to a better start, but Stingley started to look really good last year. And again, you got to give these guys 3-4 years. It's going to be the same discussion between him and Will Johnson. And I'll tell you what, I know how highly we all talked about Will Johnson. I know that you're a big Michigan guy, Greg. I started watching more of Morrison as we got closer to this show, and I think he's a better natural corner. And I think with Johnson might have a slightly higher upside because of the size.
That's saying a lot.
It is. And trust me, I mean, to be 1A and 1B among those 2, you're still looking at, we could even say top 5 here. We can even get away from top 10, because it's a really important position. It's hard to find good talent. I think these guys could have come out last year and probably been the top corner in this class, really. My favorite thing about Morrison, just beyond the skill set, the quickness in his feet, the ability to read routes and anticipate, is how competitive he is against his best competition. Go pop in. You could, if you get the real tape or you just watch the broadcast of what he did against Marvin Harrison in Ohio State last year. Yep. I thought it was the best cornerback play I saw Harrison play against all year. maybe even ever. I think that Morrison was really kind of locking him down to a certain point. Harrison made a couple like cartoon character grabs, and that's why he's one of the most elite prospects we've ever seen at that position. But Morrison more than held his own. And I think that he's got a really bright future. Those 6 interceptions and then again, another 3 last year, it was no fluke. His interceptions were earned. And he even had another couple close calls last year where, the boundary came into play and kind of took one away from him. But, this is a kid that I think has special written all over him. And I actually was going to talk about Howard Cross as my defensive tackle from the ACC. But then I just figured, man, this is too much Notre Dame, and I had to talk about this kid. So I made sure I kept Morrison in the queue and went to Jamir Carter for at defensive tackle.
Well, again, I said in the beginning, I mean, Notre Dame is going to have a player. We're going to talk about each position. I mean, they're going to have some defense.
Yep,
they
should. They should.
Yeah. So now I don't know if they have like a high impact edge rusher. I mean, that's the one thing that but look, they're just loaded. So, who knows?
A lot of pressure on Riley Leonard this year, because that other than him, that team is pretty stacked. So if they don't do well, it's going to be a lot on his shoulders.
He's such a good player. Hayden, I want to get your opinion on him as well. Because Dave said he believes right now it's Morrison maybe 1A, Johnson 1B. Do you agree?
As David said, I think it's a little early to say who's 1A, 1B. I think we should also consider Travis Hunter in that conversation as well, as possibly the top 3, maybe even 1A, 1B, 1C. Because, I mean, Travis Hunter is excellent in his own right as well. Whether you put him at receiver, DB, I mean, you're talking about if you need a corner this year and you have a first-round pick, I mean, it's like you have your choice of some really great players this year. So really excited to see how they all perform this season.
Well, that's next week, right? Colorado?
Yep. Colorado would be next week.
Yeah. I guess Hayden's calling get the Travis Hunter to talk about him next week.
There we go. That's right.
Yeah. All right. So Benjamin, do you see anything one specific thing though that does separate them? I mean, size, length, anything at all that separates Morrison and Johnson?
I mean, I Johnson's got the dibs on size,
okay.
But I wouldn't say he's got the dibs on speed. And I think Morrison is just a little bit more fluid with his footwork and his hips and balance and body control. It just seems to me that there's less catch up in his game, where Johnson has the talent to catch up, but he's a little late to recognize at times. But I think Morrison is kind of reading the route after a step or two, or even knows what's coming before the snap is even off the ground.
So he anticipates really well. He's got that, and these are the things I guess you also need to have if you're a special corner and you're only 6 feet,
6 foot 190,
something like that.
6 foot 186 is what I have.
It's good, but it's not. It's not like Will Johnson, like you said. So right. That's where he's got to make up for it. Okay.
Yep.
Let's. We've got a couple more to go here at corner. So. First off, Hayden, Darriel Porter Jr. And here's a guy that just broke out immediately as a true freshman at West Virginia. Had a monster campaign. Then he transferred to Miami. And then not sure what happened the year before, but last year you looked at it and you're like, just if you're not a Miami fan, you look at the numbers, you look at stats and stuff, and you're like, well, this guy didn't do anything. But he didn't do anything because chances are, and again, I watch a lot of Miami Hurricanes football, but I'm just guessing it's because they weren't throwing his way a lot.
Yeah, sure. And also, by the way, if you came onto this show, expecting to hear a bunch of big name players, I'm sorry. If the Harvard defensive tackle, corner with 23 tackles this past season, probably doesn't fit that profile. But when we get into next year, when we get into the NFL draft talk next year, I think these are all going to be guys that we're going to hear about. Darriel Porter included in that from Miami. Like you said, he was a transfer from West Virginia, broke out during the 2021 season there. In 2022, didn't get a whole lot of snaps, didn't play a whole lot. And then entering 2023, earned the starting role and, had an opportunity to shine, and he took advantage of it. He's not really a physically imposing player. He's 5'10", 185 pounds on the roster. There were a few games that I watched of his. If you have been a fan of this show and watched a couple live streams, you know that I love Tez Walker out of UNC. So naturally I had to watch that game, and he more than held his own in that game. He did a really impressive job. He's really smart in zone coverage. He's not going to bite on routes. He has a good understanding of who to pick up in his zone. He sees routes develop quickly. He reacts accordingly in both man and zone coverage. He's got great speed, especially in recovery, to stay in phase or to get back in phase quickly. Not afraid to tackle. He's a physical player. Really impressive V-step. And if you don't know what a V-step is, I'm talking about usually, breaking downhill on an angle. So if you're playing an off man, it's something that you'll see regularly when breaking down on an angle. Does have some strength limitations when trying to jam receivers. He oftentimes gives up, a big cushion, allowing some stuff underneath of him. But other than a couple I shouldn't say small. Strength is definitely a big part of that. But other than his strength and maybe a couple technical things, he had a really impressive, few games that I watched of his. So he's going to be a player that I keep an eye on this coming season, and interested to see what he does.
Is he the son of Darriel Porter, who played in the NFL? Do you know?
I do not know off the top of my head. That would be a great question to look up.
Yeah, because there was a Darriel Porter that played in the NFL. It'd be interesting to find out if that's his son. Okay, so one more before we move on to safety and wrap it up, Dave. We're going to go back to you and another corner. This one is a 60-year senior from Louisville. So another Louisville player who actually spent his first few seasons at Middle Tennessee. But this is a guy, there's not many players in college football that have 13 career interceptions.
Yeah.
So he's doing something right. But I guess that's what happens when you start your career at Middle Tennessee State, and Louisville is still not really a program that a whole lot of people pay attention to. But that's why you want to watch shows like this to find out about players like this.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, the Louisville has been putting some quality cornerback talent into the league in recent years, and the coaching staff can't speak highly enough about this kid. They're saying he's the best corner they've had, and they've had a couple drafted in recent drafts. There's two traits about this kid that are absolute standout, even though he's a sixth-year senior. And again, you don't want to dock him too much, but he will enter the league a little older than your average rookie. And again, it took him 6 years to get to this level. But this kid has elite speed. He ran a 10.4 100 in high school, and then he also won the state championship in the 200-meter. And I'm going to tell you why that's important. We love the 40. We know it's really important for the cornerback position, especially. That 10.4 number usually equates to sub 4.4. So we're probably looking at a kid that's going to run the 6'3". He's 6 foot. He's 195. So he's not a twig, right? And then you have the interceptions. You have 13 career interceptions. But what I love about this, he averages 35 yards per return on those interceptions.
Okay.
I mean, it is big time playmaking ability. In my opinion, that's why Emmanuel Forbes got drafted in the first round by the Commanders. I didn't think he was a first round corner, but the league they're just kind of always starving for that. Hey, maybe we get our Deron Bland here. Maybe we got our Trayvon Diggs here. This playmaking ability that really changes our defense and can change the trajectory of a game. And the kid, he's also, he's instinctive. If you watch him make plays on the ball, you're looking at a pairing of real legitimate timed verified speed with production, with instincts, and there's some shutdown potential in him. And I mean that. I think this is a kid that I'm going to look for his toughest opponents when I start breaking down what and when I'm going to watch who. And I want to see him matched up against his toughest wide receivers. And if he can lock those guys down and carry this production over, I think he's got starter caliber grade in him, which means day two.
Quincy Riley from Louisville. So keep an eye on it'd be also interesting to see how Louisville responds this season, because Brom is such an excellent coach. No surprise that he got that program quickly to respond. Didn't work out for him late in the season. So, and I believe they're changing quarterbacks now because their quarterback left, correct? Was it Plummer, so. I believe, left, I believe.
Yep.
So Yeah, so we'll see exactly who takes over there. A very important position, obviously, to replace. Okay. By the way, I also just wanted to mention Dorian Strong, the fifth-year senior out of Virginia Tech. Again, another Virginia Tech Hokie player. So this is a guy maybe to keep an eye on as well. The cornerback, Dorian Strong, looked really good last season, and definitely a player I think we should all keep an eye on. All right, safety. By the way, believe it or not, we are going to once again talk Notre Dame football. I told you we're going to talk about him on almost every position. We go back to you, Dave, for Xavier Watts, who had a huge 2023 with 7 interceptions.
Yeah, Xavier Watts actually arrived. He was a very overlooked wide receiver recruit. He actually, his first year on campus at Notre Dame, he was a wide receiver. And then he made the shift to the defensive side in year 2, and he really was a special teamer. 2022, he took over the starting role over the final third of the season. But then, as you just said, the 2023 season was the breakout. This is the winner of the Nagurski Award, the best defensive player in the country.
Yeah, what's up with that? Are you surprised about that? Or is it because that's saying an awful lot?
It is. I mean, the college awards, it's just something that we put in our notes, but it's never going to mean much to me anyway. Even the all-conference honors is just something that we can talk about.
But it's eye-opening, though, isn't it?
That he won the award?
Yeah, that says something.
I mean, these vote-getters these voters, is it politicized at all with Notre Dame football? That golden helmet, does it sway guys? They love turnovers, big plays. Was he the best defensive player in the country last year? No, he was not.
Yeah.
I mean, right now I have a third or fourth round grade on him, just based on the tools itself. He does play. He does have some tightness in him, but I love the style of play. And if there's one number that translates for safety success from college to the NFL, it's interceptions. So if this kid goes out, he had 7 last year. If he goes out and puts out another productive season from a turnover perspective, we could see him move up a little bit. I want to see him clean up the tackling. That's a big deal for me at safety. Yep. You are the last line of defense. You're going to be on an island against a lot of ball carriers in space. You cannot miss a lot of tackles. He's got to clean that up. But, he plays smart. I think the Notre Dame defense they're a really fun unit to watch. We're going to keep saying this over and over, but they're just well coached. They're well schemed. And I think he fits in well with that kind of system where if anyone plays their role, he produces like this. Is he a great player by himself? Is he Ed Reed, Sean Taylor? No, he's not. I don't know if he's going to grade out as high as Tyler Nubin did last year. Another guy that had a lot of interceptions throughout his career. But there's a lot to his game and a lot from his background that kind of carries over to the NFL at the next level.
Well, Freeman, who we know he can coach defense, and they've got a we just went over the defensive players that they're going to have. So he's going to have a lot of pressure on him, not just Riley Leonard, but Morrison's going to have a lot of pressure on him because that defense is going to be one of the top defenses in the country. So
should be.
So we'll see how things go for Notre Dame. Of course, we've got a long way to go before we start breaking down Notre Dame, the entire team, and the season. But one more to go. Hayden, you want to wrap up with Donovan McMillan at a Pitt. He had a nice season last season. He led the team with 105 tackles in just his first season because he played for the Florida Gators for the first couple of years, and he didn't really play much. He didn't really produce much. But this is why the transfer portal does work, I think, more often than not.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. When I was watching Donovan McMillan, I just feel like towards the end of the season, he's going to end up being one of my favorite prospects in the draft. Everyone has their list of my guys, quote unquote, when they're watching through it. If you were a fan of Jaden Hicks out of Washington State this past season, very similar play style, very similar player. As you mentioned, came over from the Florida Gators, where he really didn't play a whole lot. He was mostly just a reserve player. He made an impact on special teams, but other than that, didn't get on the field a whole lot on defense. And then after an offseason at Pitt, worked his way up into the starting role at one of their safety spots, ended up becoming an all-conference honorable mention player in his first season, and ended up also leading the team in tackles. He had 105 tackles overall, which you mentioned as well. One thing I really admired about his game is he was a player that showed up in the big games throughout the season. There were 3 games that I noted in particular. West Virginia, which, by the way, Pitt, West Virginia, one of the more underrated rivalry games that often gets forgotten about, ended up coming away with 18 tackles in the game, which, if looking at some of the, Pitt defenders over the past few years, he had the most tackles of any of them since 2015. And it was also tied for the most tackles by an ACC player during the 2023 season. You look at the Notre Dame game, you look at the Florida State game, not just from a statistics standpoint, he had 18 tackles combined in those games as well. But just the impact that he made on the defense was really impressive. He's 6'2", 205 pounds. His size from the back, or I should say his size really shows up on tape. He's got long arms. He's going to be physical with receivers downfield. He's going to be physical with blockers in the box. Really impressive movement skills for someone of his size. Drops back into coverage with a fluid back pedal. Like I said, if you watched a lot of Jaden Hicks, he was a physical run defender as well. It's going to be the same thing for McMillan. He comes down into the box in a hurry. He's going to be able to fill gaps, be able to hold his own in the trenches. Now, one of the things that I didn't love about Jaden Hicks, I didn't think he was going to be like a true sideline-to-sideline one-high defender at the next level. I kind of feel the same way about McMillan, just not quite the rangy player you'd look for, and maybe like a true one-high, sideline-to-sideline type of player. And also as a young, inexperienced player, just felt like he was trying to do a little too much. There were times, let's say, for example, when they were rolling from too high to one high, where he just gets stuck staring at the quarterback and wouldn't get back in the post. Just things like that, where he's just going to need a little bit more experience before, he can really take off and become, get into the conversation. But, entering, the 2024 season, should have another year of starting experience. And we're going to see, I think by the end of the season, we're going to be talking about him, as one of the top safeties in the draft.
All right. So that's going to wrap up the ACC. Again, the offense, we did that last week. The video, of course, is already available up on the site here at Ourlads Football YouTube channel. Of course, this one will be posted just instantaneously. So if you just came in late, you'll be able to watch it. By the way, I know you guys, Hayden, we're going to see you next week, but Dave may not see you. Just if you're thinking Big 12 football, are you thinking Ollie Gordon? Are you thinking, I'm thinking Jalen Daniels. I think this kid, if he can stay healthy for Kansas, can be a special quarterback. We saw what Kansas did without him for most of the season. I also think Iowa State could be a team to keep an eye on. I'll be very interested to find out what players they have and we talk about in the next couple of weeks, because Campbell's just too good of a coach. And now that Texas and Oklahoma are out of the way, I think he's somebody to keep an eye on. So, yeah, Ollie Gordon, could he possibly be the best player in the conference?
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, because Arizona's coming to the Big 12, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. They are. That's right.
So, I mean,
my wide receiver, right?
Yeah, the McMillan's going to be the best player in that conference, but Ollie Gordon, I do like. I love the running backs.
Oh, and Colorado.
Yeah.
Travis Hunter and Shedeur
Sanders. Yeah. We have to like recalibrate.
I know, that's right.
12,
I'm thinking the old.
I still think Oklahoma, Texas. It's going to take me a little bit more time. I'm leaving for vacation next week. Recharge the batteries, and then once I get boots on the ground back in here in Jersey, that's when I really start going all in on the prep for next season. And if you told me to rattle off every team in the Big 12 right now, I probably would miss one or two. But Ollie Gordon will be up there. McMillan will be up there. There's going to be a lot of offensive firepower in that conference once again.
And I said it last week. I'll say it again this week. I actually said it a few weeks ago. Just really bummer that Jed Fish left Arizona. Just loved what was going on there. They've got this, you've seen him. They've got that freshman quarterback, Fafita, who is looking like, again, it sucks that he's not going to have Jed Fish with him, but still, he was developing so nicely. You just talked about the receiver they have there. So, yeah, Arizona, Colorado. It's going to be an exciting conference. And I think it's going to be a better conference, Hayden, just because of the fact that Texas and Oklahoma aren't there. So it's going to be completely wide open.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were just talking about too just now. Arizona, you're just talking about Noah Fafita. Even UCF, and I know KJ Jefferson maybe not be, the top name that you think of when you think of draftable quarterbacks, but UCF moving up to the Big 12 this past year, he transferred over there. They got some big time transfers as well. I think UCF could be a potential team to watch this year as well.
All right, guys. Appreciate it as always. Hayden, we'll probably talk to you next week with Coop. Dave, enjoy your vacation.
Thank you.
Because I don't think you get any more. when the season's over, because the season's coming soon.
It's
and
coming.
I think
It's
this
coming
is
hard.
it.
It's coming hard.
I'm not sure you're going to be allowed to take another vacation until February, maybe something like that. So, or you could try. But anyway, I want to remind everybody to subscribe to the channel here. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, share. We appreciate all of that, obviously. And don't forget, if you are a Big 12 football fan, especially, you can join us the next couple of weeks when we talk Big 12 football here. Scouting, Ourlads. Don't forget the draft review guide is available at ourlads.com. This is where you want to order it. You order it right now, it should be in your mailbox in the next couple of days. So this is the perfect time to order the Ourlads draft review guide for 2024. That was the 2023 edition. For Hayden Russell, Dave Syvertsen, and Greg DePalma, we'll see you next time.